What's up, guys? This is Heist, and today we are in Altoona, Pennsylvania at the Railroader Memorials Museum. The museum here is fantastic and has a wonderful exhibit of a bunch of different Pennsylvania Railroad artifacts. And in fact, it's actually within an original Altoona Shops Complex building, the Master Mechanics building, built in 1882. It's a wonderful way to interpret the equipment and the story of the Pennsylvania Railroad. But we're specifically here today to talk about a specific locomotive, the Pennsylvania Railroad 1361, one of the few K4 type steam locomotives that still exists, and the one that is going to be the only one to run. This is Matthew Wolf. He's the curator here at the museum in Altoona. Matthew, tell us a little bit about the 1361 and why it's important.
Yeah, sure. So 1361 was built here in Altoona in May of 1918. It was born here, it was designed here, built here, and it means a lot to the city of Altoona and its people because it was the people of Altoona who built it. And it operated until 1957, accumulated about 2.5 million miles along the Pennsylvania Railroad system. After that, it was put on display up at the world-famous Horseshoe Curve till about the mid-1980s when they brought it down off the mountain to run excursions.
Right, and so it did run in preservation for at least a couple years.
Yes.
And then it went down for rebuilds, and then all of the laws that govern everything about steam locomotives totally changed.
Yes, and then by the late 80s, early 90s, a full rebuild had to commence, and 30 years later, we are still conducting a full rebuild, but we are doing it under state and federal laws. We are making sure that we are following everything correctly according to standards.
Of course, yeah, as you do. And anytime you're doing a project to rebuild a locomotive, it's always a pretty extensive amount of work. There's tons of components. Everything's big, everything's heavy, everything's complicated and expensive.
Yes.
And so tell us a little bit about the work that has been going on recently on the 1361.
Sure. So 1361's biggest project right now is the firebox and boiler. Right now we are currently fundraising to complete the firebox as well as the boiler to get it on its frame. An exact time frame is still to be determined.
Right, of course.
But we are hoping here very soon that the firebox will be completed. And the firebox was actually the bulk of the work that needed to be done.
Right.
Once the firebox is done, hopefully all the other pieces can fall into place.
It's really exciting to see, and it really feels like there's been a lot more blood being poured into this project.
Yes.
It seems that in the recent years, after a bit of a dormant period, you guys are really moving and trucking away on it, so it's going to be really exciting to see.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
It's not often you get to see a boiler off of a frame, and especially not one that looks like this. Bell pair boilers, very interesting, and as we talked about a little bit with Matt, this has been the biggest crux and the biggest part of the restoration of the locomotives because the bell pair was designed with a safety factor of 3.5, which worked under the old law but doesn't work under the modern law. And so here you can see just how much work is going in, and the contractors are coming in redoing a serious amount of this. There's no interior sheets in the boiler right now. It's all just the exterior firebox, and there's still more welding to do and all the bolts to run in and the interior of the firebox to build. So definitely a long way to go, but really fascinating to take a look at up close. It's not a conventional boiler design for most of us out there, though there are a fair amount of bell pairs in service across the world. They do have them in Europe as well, but very neat to see, and goodness, you guys have had your work cut out for you.
You certainly do.
I've never gotten to see an engine without the interior firebox in it, and you can see just how thick and how massive the mud ring or the foundation ring of the locomotive is, and it's not even riveted in place yet. So that's all work that they're going to be doing through the remainder of this year. But you can see how crazy the construction is. We were marveling over it earlier when we walked right in. Why isn't it flat? Why would you do that? I'm actually curious. If any of you in the comments know, feel free and let us know, of course. But seeing the back side of the throat sheet and just how much work goes into forming this massive of a structure out of steel this thick, it's definitely a marvel to see.
Well, like I said, it's not every day you get to see a locomotive to its bare bones.
No, I mean, you called it a skeleton, and that's
what I always like to tell people.
It's
like,
absolutely
this is the skeleton.
accurate. I mean, it's a skeleton and it's mid-surgery right now.
Yeah.
I mean, the side sheets are all brand new and everything's been formed in, but still to be welded all the way up, and that's just a small amount of work. So over here is the interior crown sheet? No, it's the exterior. Okay. So we don't quite have the lid on the exterior of the firebox yet, but cool. It's only, you know, a small piece of metal still to go. Wow. So tell me, what can folks do to help you guys right now?
So to help with the restoration of 1361, you can go to our website, railroadcity.org, and on there's a K4 tab. You can go ahead and donate whatever your heart contends. It could be $1, $13.61, or maybe even a couple thousand, who knows? But all we know is here at the Railroaders Memorial Museum, whatever you donate, whatever you contribute, is more than plentiful for us, because that is $1 closer to having the spirit of Altoona, which is K4 1361, running again.
Back in service. It's going to be so cool to see. The K4 is such an iconic locomotive,
yes,
built here, built in Altoona,
and will be the only one running. It will be the only K4 running in the world.
Right.
K4 1361.
Let's come take a look at frame things.
Frame things.
Frame things, yeah, it's interesting to see something without the drivers under it, without the boiler on top of it. You get to see so much of the locomotive that you don't typically get to see. What does the ash pan look like? Well, here you go. Here's ash pan without boiler and firebox and everything in the way. And you can see how things had to get radiused and adjusted and set up to make the clearances actually work out. One of the interesting things about the Pennsylvania Railroad is that because they've been around for so long, the loading gauge, the overall profile of the locomotive, is a lot smaller than a lot of other railroads out there. Not quite as small as things over in Britain or in Europe, but considerably tighter than something out west like the Union Pacific. And so the little Rio Grande engines I run are actually wider than this K4. So as you see this huge trailing truck frame casting and assembly and everything, it has to be tucked up in tight, because otherwise the locomotives would run into each other as they passed. So it's really neat to see the engineering that went into making that happen, because, yeah, nice and tight. And so this locomotive was built like over there.
Correct.
It's just the coolest thing. They made so many locomotives here at Altoona, and to have this locomotive undergoing all this stuff where it was born, basically.
Yep.
Very few places in the world can say that.
Yeah,
you know,
not only born here, but designed here.
Right.
Born here, built here,
yeah,
everything.
And you get to see so many bits of the locomotive that you don't get to see with, you know, when everything's put together. There's a driving box here, there's the wheel set. I mean, you can't even get up on it, but now you can see, hey, this is how the frame of the locomotive works. We have a wedge, we have a lollipop. I was getting to quiz some of my friends who came along. Hey, do you know what this is? You've probably never gotten to see it before, because there's always a bunch of stuff in the way.
Yeah.
You know, the rest of the locomotive. So it's really cool to see all of the new steel, all of the new parts, and everything that's going in here to get everything set up.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a kit form locomotive right now, but in the near future, it's going to start coming together. And I bet once the boiler's done, you get it set on the frame, you've got a whole pile of parts over there. It's
Yep.
just a giant kit at that point.
It is.
It'll start to come together kind of quickly.
And it will look like a steam engine.
It'll look like a steam engine again,
Yep.
not brown metal.
Yes, yes.
Oh, this is cool. Come take a look at this. I didn't notice this when we were first looking around. The crosshead's actually got multiple wear surfaces on it. That's actually... Pennsylvania, why would you do that? I guess it lessens the load on each wear surface, but manufacturing that's a ton of time on like a slaughter or a shaper or something to get that cut out and then to build a shoe for the crosshead that way. That's very neat. That's one of the things about the Pennsylvania Railroad that made them special, was
Yeah.
that we saw earlier in the exhibits of the museum how much random things they tested,
Yep.
what they tried to do. They made the locomotive and the railroad really scientific in a way.
Yeah,
You were
for
talking
sure.
about oranges.
Yes, they tested oranges, and K4s was the first scientifically engineered steam engine for the Pennsylvania Railroad on the purpose of it being passenger.
Right.
To be run the most effective, be the most efficient for the line.
How can we make the best locomotive?
Yes.
And they're such an iconic, cool design.
Yeah.
And it's going to be so cool to see it put back together. But it's amazing to just stand right next to it. You see pictures, and I'm around locomotives and trains all the time, but especially when they get into my shop. Thank you, Norfolk Southern, probably?
Yes.
Probably, yes.
It's the only railroad.
Okay, yes, at least in these parts. Former Pennsy, of
Former
course.
Pennsy, former Penn Central, former Conrail, now Norfolk Southern.
Now Norfolk Southern.
Number 4.
Right. It's so neat to walk up to something and go, oh, the cylinders are up here. The snifter is above my head. It's just utterly unlike anything else because the drivers are so big. It's not something that I get to experience even as much as I get to go around these things. And wow, I mean, it's going to be a serious business locomotive when it all gets wrapped up. So Colin, tell me a little bit about what 1361 means to you.
It means a lot about history. It's about Altoona, about being loud, about being fun.
We all love that. We're all excited. Getting to see the engine run is going to be really cool. What are you excited about most about seeing the 1361 run again?
Noises. It's
Yes.
whistle, it's bell, the smells of coal.
Everything about a steam locomotive has just got so much personality and character, and I'm glad that you're excited about it too.
Big
Cool.
loud thing, BLT.
Big loud thing. Yes, the BLT. Perfect.
If you want it to be short, BLT, big
There
loud
you go.
thing. Not bacon, lettuce, and tomato. Big loud thing.
Yes. And this is interesting. I'm kind of wondering, did she only get one new cylinder? Or, I didn't notice this earlier. I mean, the color is so very different. Have you guys had the two halves apart? Do you know?
I honestly do not know.
Huh.
I cannot answer that.
Because, yeah, I don't know. It would be interesting if it got one or two. Come, present. Foamer.
Now, I'm pretty sure when this thing was in the shop for its post-war rebuild, when it got the cast pilot, the front end rearranged and everything
Right.
else, I'm pretty sure it only got the one. And here's how you can kind of tell.
Okay.
If you come over here, look at the difference between this side and
Right,
that side.
right. I mean,
This side's a lot more worn in.
yeah. And if you cast both of them brand new, I mean, that's bizarre. And that is just the most railroad thing I've ever heard. Oh yeah, we gave it one new cylinder because, you know, the other one was fine. It's fine. Yeah, that tracks. There's a lot of things that are maintenance items on modern day locomotives that I got to see at the shop at BNSF. Hey, we have two starters. Only one of them's bad, so we're just gonna replace that one. And then the next one fails a year later. Thankfully, at least when you're talking about a cylinder casting, it's a little bit more stout than something else. So, but what a wacky little thing, and something that you probably wouldn't get to notice once everything's painted up, put together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you see the pilot truck brakes?
It's got brakes on the pilot?
Brakes on the pilot.
Oh my God.
So the Pennsy started doing that in the 1880s.
Because why not just add a bunch more complexity in here? There's nothing else going on. Goodness, that's actually pretty cool. But if you're talking about passenger service, a big 462 like this, and really running a lot of commuter service and commuter trains throughout the area, the commuter train and the commuter train life is a pretty hard life for a locomotive. I always used to joke when I was moving from my gig at BNSF to working for Sound Transit, which is the commuter train outfit out in Seattle. I was sitting there assuming, oh, our locomotives should be in pretty good shape because they don't have to haul miles of freight and they're not being beaten to death. Wrong. You look at the event recorder data on those locomotives and it's like, okay, it was sitting there, and then they put it in notch 8 and left it in notch 8 until they put it in full application, full service, full dynamics, slamming on the brakes, getting into the next station. It's just like, oh, it's just all go or all stop. There's nothing in between. And so a steam locomotive, it makes sense. Okay, there's not a ton of weight on the pilot, and you definitely don't want to slide wheels flat and everything, but putting in brakes on the pilot, putting brakes in on the trailing truck, that's going to increase the braking effort. That makes sense for something, it's a commuter service engine. So that's cool. Wow.
That was universal across both freight and passenger.
The Pennsy just did that?
Yes.
The standard railroad of the world that only they followed their own standards. And not always.
I think as a part of a good clip of this video is explaining where that nickname came from.
Sure.
Because that is up here. The nickname comes from knuckle couplers and Westinghouse air brakes.
Okay.
The Pennsy invested heavily in both the Janey Corporation and the Westinghouse Corporation.
Okay.
And when the time came for the federal government to be like, hey, the railroads need to standardize, the Pennsy lobbied heavily so they didn't need to change because they had the most powerful railroad in the country. They could lobby and be like, hey, we're doing this. We interchange with a lot of other railroads. Why not make this the standard because it works and we're already using it?
That is hilarious.
There you go.
That is also the single most Pennsylvania Railroad thing I've ever heard.
I agree.
Yeah,
And
no, us. You must be like us. Yeah, that is.
Another fun tidbit is that they adopted air brakes and knuckles respectively 12 and 8 years before they were legally mandated.
Hey, at least they cared somewhat about safety.
standard.
Yeah, there you go.
And they adopted them across the system. It wasn't a slow adoption. It was immediate. Everything needs to go into the
Send
shop,
it to the shop.
get upgraded
Yeah,
now.
that's cool. Wow, goodness, this is neat. This is really neat. So this is kind of what I meant when I was talking about it being a kit locomotive. Behold, all of the parts. You've already desprued them and filed them. That's very nice.
Yep.
Which, I mean, that must have taken a lot of time and like a comically large pair of sprue nippers. Like, I'm just picturing the stormtroopers in Spaceballs with the giant comb.
Oh, yes.
But it's just a giant pair of scissors
Yes.
to cut the parts off of the
yes.
sprue. So a fair amount of these parts looks like have had machine work done. It looks like some have not yet been done, but there'll be a pattern for what comes next.
Yep.
That's really neat, and it's cool to see, hey, it's all here, it's all under one roof, it's all in one place.
Yes.
And in some cases, I mean, you can see the valves over there that are wrapped up in duct tape. Make sure that the rings are all good, you're not harming any of those surfaces. Looks like pretty much ready to go once everything else is. So there's a lot of work that you guys have done that it seems like the project might have been quiet for a long time, but now it's really rolling.
Yep.
So this is going to come together pretty quickly, I'd bet.
Yeah, and you know, this is a project before the project. You want to
Right.
make sure you have the project set up before you start the project.
Yes.
So doing this definitely helps speed up the process of the
Right.
project.
Yeah, it's not just a simple thing of, okay, well, we got the boiler done. Oh, crap, now there's the rest of it. But
Yes.
you've already kind of started that, you're organized.
Yep.
That's pretty good project management. It's going to be cool to see.
Yes.
We just noticed the other cylinders from 1939.
So they replaced one at a different time as the other one.
Hey,
That's
look at the
hilarious.
sunlight coming in on the tender.
Oh, cool.
You can see the green.
It's green. They were green. Just
You can see it. You
just-
can see the dust.
barely. So this is obviously the most exciting, kind of news that we've heard out of the project, at least out there on the internet, is that the tender's basically done.
Yes, so this past May, we managed to get it in its DLE paint, and it's not 100% done. We still have a little bit more work done to do, but for the most part, it's the bulk of the work has been done.
And it looks, it's gorgeous, and everyone's talked about the specific shade of color. If you learn anything about railway historians and the people at museums, paint colors, always the biggest thing. One of my good friends who works on some projects with me is the paint expert guy, and he's actually got license at several museums to just come and start sanding their equipment, the historic cars, just to get the colors right, because then he can turn back to the museum and go, hey, this is what you got to do.
Yeah.
And so to see this very talked about, very important paint from the Pennsylvania Railroad, which has been done a number of different times, to see it done properly as just mostly black.
Yes.
Not a little, just a little bit of green. Seeing it done properly is really cool, and it's honestly hard to tell. It doesn't hardly look green until you get that little bit of sunlight on it, and then it's like, oh yeah, no, that's not black.
It's green.
Yeah. It was kind of like how a lot of the early Union Pacific stuff, people will paint up the boiler jacket totally blue, but it was just a drop of blue to make the black more black.
Yeah.
If you just do it black, then it could in fact be a little bit more black. And so Nigel Tufnell would be sad in Spinal Tap. But anyway. It's so neat to see all of the different things on a tender like this on a high-speed engine. Namely, of course, thing that I've never gotten to see or operate, and hopefully someday I would love to get the experience of a stoker, but seeing the size of this screw is ridiculous. You're talking about feeding tons and tons of coal very, very quickly, and that's really, really cool to see. As well, everything else that comes into this, it's not just a simple tender, water, coal, etc. The amount of electronics that go into it and everything else that the Pennsylvania Railroad did is really neat to kind of get up and take a look at up close.
Yeah.
And then, of course, perhaps one of the neatest things about some of the high-speed Pennsy stuff, they weren't the only railroad to have this, but the giant scoop to drop down into the track pan and pick up water on the fly is one of the coolest little things. And I guess it's air operated. I didn't pick up on that earlier. That's really nifty. Wow, so it's got like power reverse, but it's power drop.
Yes.
That's cool. So, Auntie, just how much water could these scoops actually pick up?
So the maximum speed through the troughs with the scoop down was 60 miles an hour.
Okay.
At 60 miles an hour, in 30 seconds, a locomotive could pick up about 6,000 gallons of water.
That's the entire tender tank behind 491. That's the whole tank in 30 seconds. It takes us 30 minutes to fill it with our water tower.
You could fill this tender from empty to full in 60 seconds.
That is hilarious. And goodness, and when you're running at speeds up to 100 mile an hour trying to run these big passenger trains as quick as you can, that's the way to do it. And wow, did she break her tender frame at some point? This looks like, this huge gusset right here looks like it's been a repair. Unless they just did it for strength, I don't know.
Oh God, it's the tender for the broker.
I do not know.
Interesting.
I cannot answer that.
Huh. I'd be curious to know if that was just part of the design, because you do this when you're joining two dissimilar metals to weld. If you see like a coupler shank get extended or something, you end up getting this, and the extra little bits in there allow for a little extra strength. So that'd be interesting. Yeah. Oh, and I guess the couple things left to do in the tender are the brake rigging, because there's the brake shoes aren't on it. There you go. Huh. How cool. I hope you guys can help give these folks some help and support, love, share the news. It's going to be exciting. In the next couple years, this project's going to get wrapped up, and seeing a K4 back out on the main again is going to be really cool.
Yeah, and you can follow along the project on our Facebook page. And keep an eye on our website. We'll be updating whenever project's done.
Awesome.
Whenever project's done, whatever the updates process, we'll all let you know.
Awesome. Well, Matthew, thank you so much for having me out and accommodating myself and a couple friends. We love taking a look at the engine, getting to nerd out a little bit, share a little history, share little stories, and we hope you guys enjoyed the ride too. Thank you so much for watching, as always, and please try and help the museums out there and give your support and love to these guys, because this is going to be a really cool thing. Thanks for watching. look, it's behind the scenes of thumbnails.